We are recording.
We are live.
No.
No.
I mean,
not.
we are.
We are live
It's
to
always-
a hard disk.
Yes. We are alive.
What does it mean to have a human in the loop?
Human in the loop.
Human in the loop.
What in the world is a human in the loop?
Being a human in the loop.
AI in the loop. Humans in charge.
Welcome to Human in the Loop.
This is Hamish and Elena for the Loop Back, joined by our Head of Security and Technical Operations, George. And today's been an interesting morning because some cybersec stuff has gone down. So by the time you're listening to this, it will have been only 24 hours.
Slightly more than 24 hours because it was 4:30 this morning that it was detected.
Give or take, yeah, 1300 UTC was the detection, and live from about 1100 UTC on the 8th of September.
Like literally what happened. I saw the alert email, and as a marketer in residence, I was like, dear God, I hope this doesn't apply to me. Turns out it doesn't, but what actually happened?
So when you're doing software development, you don't write all of your own code, right? Like some of it you write, but you also use a lot of existing code because a lot of behavior you need is common across basically every program, right? So opening a file, that is something that needs some code. That's actually built into most languages, but opening a CSV file and parsing out the CSV, if you're going to do that, no point writing a CSV parser. You might as well use one that somebody's already done. It'll probably be better than whatever you could write, as long as it's under the right license and so forth. And so every language has a package manager, which it uses to get different versions of your dependencies and pull it into projects. The one that is used by Node.js, which is a language that's used quite a lot for doing back-end development, is called NPM. And what happened is that a bunch of packages, quite popular packages, a lot of different companies have these packages included in their software. Do we know how the maintainers got compromised, George?
Yes, yeah, we do. So it was quite a sophisticated phishing attack. They targeted the maintainer, requesting they reset their two-factor authentication. They clearly already managed to compromise the maintainer's password in some method. They managed to break through their 2FA and then updated each of these base packages with this malicious code. What's quite interesting is this was incredibly targeted. They targeted what I would certainly consider sort of the fundamental baseline of all packages. These things aren't normally included as a direct dependency or included at the top level, but they are included in almost everything you touch. So as we went through software we've worked on, we saw almost every single thing we've touched over the last 12 months includes these in some shape or form. And so it meant that they did not need to target that top level dependency. They got very wide proliferation without needing to target individual packages.
And so what you do see sometimes that maintainers will go rogue, whether it's an open source or a commercial package. Normally in this case with Node.js, we're talking about open source packages. You do have to worry about malicious insider attacks, right? And so you will sometimes trust a dependency who's one of the maintainers of ultimately proves they should not have been trusted, and they will add their own malicious code. Or even sometimes not necessarily malicious code, but for instance, during the breakout of the recent war in Ukraine, there was a developer of a few dependencies who was Ukrainian and added a pro-Ukrainian message to his packages that would display when it got installed. I wouldn't call that malicious, but it's certainly undesirable, and it affected some systems that did deployment. And so in some cases, you will get a maintainer updating their own malicious code. But in this case, those maintainers seem to have mostly followed good OPSEC, but it was just a particularly sophisticated attack that managed to break through and give an attacker access to the deployment system that then allowed them to update and send a malicious package. It's kind of surprising because it was obviously like it got detected quite quickly, which is not surprising because it's quite visible, right? Like getting someone to reset their two-factor and then fairly quickly afterwards updating a bunch of packages versions. It's what we call noisy from a security point of view, like it's really visible. And so you would notice it quite quickly. And that's reasonably uncommon for a sophisticated attacker. Usually a sophisticated attacker doesn't just want to get access to a system they shouldn't have access to. They also want to do it in a really quiet way so that they can use that access for a long time and maximize the value they get from that attack. So
Yeah, what was particularly interesting about this, and what we have seen before, is that these attackers are playing on an element of embarrassment and fear in the maintainer, that the maintainer doesn't want to put their hand up and say, I made a mistake, this happened. In this case, the maintainer was actively vocal online within an hour saying, this has happened, there has been a problem. And they were able to themselves help to coordinate a response that included NPM and other security researchers. Also, interestingly, in this particular attack, admittedly, this is early days, we don't have the full picture, etc., but they appear to have been targeting crypto wallets and crypto transactions. So that short time span is potentially worthwhile for them if they can capture a significant number of transactions in the short span, and they may have been willing to be a bit noisier. Certainly when we look at sort of deploying into DeFi or smart contracts, where it's not that easy to then update that code later on, they could have gathered quite a lot of funding in that small time.
Although even then, you were only exposed to the vulnerability if you happened to install this new version of the package, right? And you're not installing packages all the time. It's only during, I guess, they're kind of looking to attack developers who are actively doing development, right? Like, given that they're trying to steal crypto wallets, you're not going to have a lot of crypto wallets on servers or on systems where you've got, like, production code being run. And so probably what they were looking to do is catch the people who were actively doing development, since that's when you're most likely to be doing a NPM package update, and expose yourself.
And in this case, it was actually directly focused on injecting into the browser runtime. So they were hoping a developer was working on something, it got injected into their browser, and then they might be doing something with their crypto at the same time, which, yeah, like you say, it's quite a unique attack. The timeline for that lines up being sort of middle of the day European time, towards the end of towards the beginning of the US workday, towards the end of the Indian workday, means they would have managed to cover the majority of the world with that time span. So even though it was only active for a couple of hours, there was enough of a blast radius there.
But fortunately, we're in New Zealand. It was quite early in the morning New Zealand time, so just by happenstance, we seem to have managed to have avoided being in the blast radius.
Thankfully this time.
Yeah.
Interestingly, looking back at the package maintainer piece that you spoke about earlier, there's been a few occurrences of this over the last 12 months where malicious packages in one way or another have been included. I think the one that a lot of people miss, and that was quite a large one towards the end of last year, was a maintainer who everybody believed to be good, who was contributing to open source. He wasn't the sole maintainer, and he had done many months of positive contributions, and then towards the end of his time decided to start including malicious code after he had built that trust base.
That was the XZ.
Yes, yeah. And so this simply proves that there should be a constant state in the open source technology world of trust but verify. Do not believe that any maintainer, whether they have all the reputation in the world or not, is committing something purely for good merits.
And we're not in a position to mandate process or behavior on open source maintainers. But one thing that PCI sort of focuses on is making sure that you have multiple people sign off on a release, which would have maybe stopped this particular attack, because you'd at least have to compromise two different maintainers' credentials in order to be able to run an attack like this. But it wouldn't necessarily have prevented the XZ attack, because not only was he well trusted, but the code that he was adding was quite well obfuscated. So it would have been very difficult for someone else reviewing it to even identify that that was a malicious attack.
What is interesting, at least in that case, is that an AI code review would probably have had a better chance at catching that code was at least abnormal and flagging it for human review. So there would be a good use case there for the inclusion of AI tooling through the code review process.
That's an AI in the loop.
There is an AI in the loop.
That behavior does get used for benefit sometimes, though. Well, for some people's benefit anyway. I know that there was a case, I think in Italy, where they had a real problem with pirated Sky decoder cards. And every time the legitimate Sky distribution system updated the software to try and invalidate the cards, the update was caught and patched around by the pirate card providers. And so what they ended up doing was distributing something that would disable all the pirated cards, but they did it across like 16 different obfuscated patches, which also had a bunch of benefits. And so when they finally sent out the trigger command and disabled all these pirate boxes, it was like it completely bricked those boxes, so you weren't able to. So in that case, obfuscation of an unintended or intended but additional side effect was used for.
Good.
Yes, air quotes good.
Air quotes
Yes.
good.
Do you think that someone does that for money or for power?
So there's, I would say there's two, actually probably three different groups. There's definitely money, and in this case it was probably money. They were looking to. Then there's another group, which I wouldn't say it's for power, but it's for lols, which is similar to power, right? They're just looking to smash things. And
Chaos theory.
Yeah. You know, some people just like to see the world burn or whatever. You know, Danu does impressions, I don't.
I know a few of them.
Yeah. And then the third group is like political or state actors who are actively like cyber warfare, looking to maintain control footholds inside other countries' infrastructure so that they can perform attacks to benefit their country.
But by far, they are the scariest. You know, there's been multiple occurrences where these nation-state actors have existed and had long-term persistence, being they have been inside the network for more than a year, and they have continual access, and they compromise supply chains to enable that access. The likes of SolarWinds will be a sort of a big one that was in the media a couple of years ago, and other large-scale supply chain attacks. And this does go right down to the security of the supply chain, even for physical hardware. There are cases where backdoors have been installed in computer chips that then get included in networking equipment or included in the computer you use. And then that nation state has access to that device forevermore. There is nothing you can do to patch that out.
Here's a question that you guys might not be able to answer.
I doubt it, but give it a go.
You can. It may be career limiting to do so. Do you, in principle, support cyber attacks when done in the pursuit of great good, like Anonymous?
So it's an interesting point. I mean, without going too deep into this, we have a law of armed conflict for physical interactions. We do not have a similar set of rules that govern cyber warfare or cyberspace. However, my understanding is worldwide is that broadly cyber warfare needs to follow the same rules of armed conflict. So a good example of that is there have been a number of attacks on critical infrastructure providers in certain war zones, for example, attacking heating and power generation in rather cold areas of the world. Now, that attack is directly designed to incapacitate or inconvenience civilians. That is a war crime under the War of Armed Conflict. You're not allowed to disproportionately target civilians with an attack. When we look at the greater good piece, the problem is that what is good for one group may not be good for another. We should never support violent protest. We should never support rioting. And is destruction of property, in the case of cyber property, not the same thing? I don't know. If we look at the exposing of information like groups from Anonymous, however, maybe that falls into a different category. I'm not clear.
I have a slightly different take. I support people's right to protest, and I think that includes protest that inconveniences people. I think that the ultimate end of a claim that protest should be quiet and polite is for that protest to go away, because that's what the people who you're protesting against would like, right? Just that they continue to get to maintain the status quo which benefits them as opposed to some other group, and that, protest should be quiet, not be protest, right? There is obviously a line where you move from inconvenience to harm, and it's very difficult to draw that line, right? Like the Just Stop Oil people, right, blocking traffic, and a lady was leaning out and like, my baby needs to get to the hospital, let me through, right? Like that's difficult in any situation because there are also people who would lean out the car and say, my baby needs to get to hospital, let me through, when what they mean is, I've got ice cream in the back melting, let me get to my freezer, right? Like, people will also claim extingent circumstance for their own benefit. So when it's a case of protest, I don't think there's any, and again, tie it back to the real world. It's a case of protest, even if it's causing inconvenience, especially if it's mostly causing inconvenience to large corporations who themselves see the law as a cudgel that they only get to wield, then I'm okay with it. However, I definitely don't think that we should be deliberately weakening our security posture for the ability to perform a cyber attack in future, right? So if a government organization knows of a vulnerability, or even worse, deliberately introduces a vulnerability for their advantage, I think that's almost always wrong, right? And that includes cryptographic backdoors where it's basically not possible to build a backdoor into cryptography that does not weaken the strength of that cryptography, right? If there's a magic key that gives the police access, there's nothing that prevents that key from being taken and used by a malicious person. In fact, there's nothing that just stops the police from using it maliciously, right? Like, there's no way you can require a key other than process, which has been demonstrably not followed in many previous examples, stops that key from just being used without a warrant and so forth. So, yeah, I think that any government organization which is deliberately harming its security in order to allow themselves an increased attack power is problematic.
Yeah, I think I would broadly agree with you. As an example, I have no problem with groups using a DDoS attack as a message of, we are unhappy. However, there have certainly been occurrences, and yes, normally it's more ransomware, but where, say, the WannaCry attack on the NHS, and there was a significant human impact to that attack in that many people died because they could not get access to healthcare. And I think that is where a line should be drawn, certainly on the protest and inconvenience. Preaching to the choir, really, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem with a cyber attack specifically, is both the damage radius is very difficult to predict, and you have much more capability to do harm as an individual, right? As an individual, the best you can do is block half a road, right?
NotPetya is a great example of that, where it was very targeted. Should be fairly well known in the community, but targeted to Ukrainian language packs. Designed to have a very specific blast radius. It was a cyber weapon, and it happened to take down Maersk shipping, which impacted a large proportion of the world because some of their users happen to be Ukrainian and have Ukrainian language packs installed. And so it's as you said, it's very easy to fail to contain the blast radius of that attack, and it's something that nations should work better on.
We're at 2 o'clock now, and we've all got jobs to get back to, including security threats to manage. So I'm just going to wrap up by correcting 3 points from the last podcast. First one, Danu was talking about, that guy Kabi Lame, and he was like, Lame, Kabi Lame, he's the TikTok star, and he points at something and he's like it's super obvious. And I had said that he got deported from the US. Partially true, misinformation being corrected. He was detained by ICE for overstaying his visa, and he did leave voluntarily, but that was just a follow-up there. Danu said that if you show a baby enough pictures of cats or cat-like animals, that it will recognize a cat in real life without ever having seen one. Kinda true. It's saying that as kids grow, by 3 months of age, infants can characterize non-human animals and things like cats, but actually the more time a child spends around a real-world creature, the better the recognition is. And lastly, and this is the slightly not safe for work thread that has made it really hard to get this podcast promoted. So Ben was talking about a woman who he couldn't remember the name of. I believe he was talking about Fei Li, who began working on ImageNet in 2006, envisioning an unprecedentedly comprehensive visual database for AI research. And they were saying basically the internet is at this point where you could ask AI what an image is and it'll tell you what it does. And I suggested that there are objects that all humans know that do a job that they were not designed for. And with a bit of a smirk and some implication, everyone understood what I was talking about. So I said that I would ask an LLM if it knew what this particular image is. I'm not going to say what it is, but I will just read it to you and you can laugh along as you understand. I say, what is this? And Claude, so polite Claude, so naive Claude says, this appears to be a digital pH meter or pH pen, an electronic device used to measure the acidity or alkalinity of liquids. The white cylindrical body must house an electronic component and display, whilst the probe at the end surely contains a pH sensor that gets immersed into liquid. I asked Perplexity. It says, this is an electric personal massager, widely known as the magic wand in many markets. It was originally for general muscle massage, but is actually famous as a personal vibrator. So Perplexity got it right. Danu told me I should ask Grok, but I'm not going to, because I'm not that unsafe. And that was the loopback for this week. Thank you, George, for joining us for this edition of Cybersecurity Update. And
Right, thank you
I'd
for having
like
me.
to say it'll be the last, but as we continue to step into AI everything, we know that threat actors are going to keep threat acting. So stay tuned for the next time we have to break down a cyber attack.